It was 12 o'clock at night. The silence of the city police station was broken by the screaming bell of a telephone. Information was received from the other side that hundreds of villagers had blocked the main highway and the situation was tense. The reason? 12-year-old Numan had been missing since morning, and the villagers' anger was boiling over at the police's inattention. A young sub-inspector, whose eyes showed no sign of exhaustion yet, immediately reached the spot along with 2 constables. The scene there was horrific. The road was closed with tractor trolleys and obstacles, and an enraged crowd was chanting slogans.
The sub-inspector got down from the vehicle.
The direction of the crowd's anger was now directly toward him. Our innocent child has been missing since morning, and the police are sleeping. An old man shouted angrily. The sub-inspector began speaking with great patience and a sympathetic tone. Your pain is my pain. But believe me, the police were not given any information about this incident. Now that we have come, do not increase one trouble over another. Open the road so that we can search for the child together. His confident tone worked like magic. The road was opened, but the real test had now begun. The sub-inspector took the child's father aside from the crowd and asked, where was he last seen? The father replied, he had gone to play with the neighbor's son, Amanullah, at 9 in the morning. The sub-inspector's sixth sense woke up. He immediately asked to call 17-year-old Amanullah. The villagers and the child's family members were both surprised and annoyed. He is our own child, why are you calling him? But the sub-inspector made them agree. During questioning, it was revealed that not only Amanullah, but his 14-year-old cousin Kalamullah was also present there. When the sub-inspector asked these 2 boys separate questions, the layers of truth began to clash with each other. One statement was north while the others was south. When the matter of taking them to the police station came up, the villagers resisted, but the sub-inspector gave Noman's father a challenge. You ask them the same questions separately yourself. If the answer turns out to be the same, I will not take them. The father asked the question, the answers were contradictory, and a wave of fear ran through the father's eyes for the first time. Sir, you are right, take them away. It was 3 in the morning. When the sub-inspector adopted a stern tone in a dark corner of the station, the villagers standing outside began to interfere again. This interference by the villagers made the situation even more complicated. On one side was the question of an innocent child's life, and on the other was the social pressure that often becomes a wall in the path of truth. A group of villagers entered the sub-inspector's room and started speaking in loud voices. Sir, these are our own children, the lights of respectable families. You cannot treat them like criminals. If you are harsh with them, we will consider it our insult. The sub-inspector took a deep breath and leaned back in his chair, looking at those people who, in their emotions, were forgetting that another child was still missing. He said in a very patient but firm tone, look, my purpose is not to insult anyone, but to find that 12-year-old Noman about whom these 2 have the last information. If you people interfere repeatedly, that important time of investigation will be wasted, which might be the last chance to save that child's life. He looked at Noman's father and asked, do you want me to stop the investigation for their sake, or do you want me to find and bring your son back? The tension in the police station room had increased to such an extent that even breathing felt difficult. When the sub-inspector saw that the villagers were not agreeing under any circumstances, he changed his strategy. He took hold of a pen and paper, called the father of the abducted boy to him, and began the proceedings of the case. Fine, if you do not want to include the children in the investigation, then we will register a formal kidnapping case, the sub-inspector said. He was just writing down the facts and events when suddenly Amanullah's father, Fazal, stood up from his place in anger and began entangling the sub-inspector in senseless talk and arguments in a loud voice. This behavior of his was not only suspicious but also surprising for the other villagers present there. It seemed as if he was intentionally wasting time or wanted to turn the police's direction somewhere else. The sub-inspector sensed that the environment could deteriorate further at this time. He quietly handed over both boys to the villagers, registered the case, and set out with his team to search for the child. As soon as he sat in the vehicle, he looked toward the constable sitting beside him. There was sweat on the constable's, forehead. Sir, something doesn't feel right. If the matter cools down, this innocent child will never be found, the constable said in a low voice. Looking toward the paths drowned in darkness, the sub-inspector replied, the game is not over yet. Fazal's behavior is telling us that the truth is very near, we just have to wait for the right time. After a long and fruitless round of searching, when the police vehicle reached the same path again, the sub-inspector's eyes widened in surprise. The villagers had blocked the same main highway once again. Tears came into the father's eyes. He folded his hands and said to the crowd, "For God's sake, please go." It was the day of Friday, but for the sub-inspector, there was neither a holiday nor peace. From 12 a.m. at night, it was now 8 a.m. in the morning. Due to exhaustion, his eyes were turning red, but he was not among those who give up. The villagers' lack of cooperation and then the false rumor of running away from the mosque had made the matter even more complicated. The sub-inspector took the help of geofencing and technical assistance, but in the backward area of the village, the cameras and signals were also not supporting him. During the afternoon, he spoke to Noman's younger brother in private. The innocent words of the small child turned sub-inspector's suspicion into certainty. Noman is not a child who would run away. Something very bad has happened to him. The tea placed on the dining table had turned cold when news of the arrival of high-ranking officers and disciplinary action, punishment, was received over the wireless. The sub-inspector left the tea right there and said to Constable Khan, "Khan, whether I get punishment or reward, I have to find this child." My conscience, it was now 8 o'clock at night. The entire area seemed to have gathered in front of the police station. The vehicles of senior officers, blue lights, and the eyes of hundreds of villagers. Everyone's gaze was fixed on this one young sub-inspector, on whom the label of failure was about to be attached. The sub-inspector took a deep breath, straightened his uniform collar, and standing before his senior officer after cutting through the crowd. There was a strange certainty in his voice when he said, standing before the high-ranking officer, the sub-inspector said something that surprised everyone. "Sir, just give me permission to search their house." There was astonishment on the senior officer's face. Sub-inspector went close to him and whispered, "Sir, I will bring these boys before you. You just have a general conversation with them. If sweat appears on their palms, then consider my suspicion correct." After a 2-minute conversation, when the senior officer saw the drenched hands of those boys, he silently patted sub-inspector and left from there with his team. This was a silent signal that the field is yours. Now extract the truth.
The intervention of a village elder silenced the furious crowd.
Either let the police do their work, or find the child yourselves. There was such weight in that elder's voice that the entire village became quiet. The sub-inspector said Bismillah, in the name of God, and started the search process. He came out of the abducted boy's house and, measuring every step, reached the house of the neighbors, Amanullah and Kalamullah. Every room, every roof, even under the beds was searched. It was now 12 o'clock at night. Hopes were dying, but sub-inspector's eyes were searching for something else. Suddenly, sub-inspector's steps stopped at the gutter of the washroom built outside Amanullah's house. He felt that the heavy cement slab had slightly shifted from its place, and the dust lying on it was strange. This gutter. Sub-inspector's sentence was still incomplete when Amanullah's father, Fazal, quickly spoke up. "Sir, I had this cleaned a month and a half ago. That is why the lid is a little loose." Sub-inspector bent down, touched the dust, and looking straight into Fazal's eyes, asked, "Mr. Fazal, it rained 2 days ago. The dust of the entire village is wet, but why is the dust lying on this lid so dry?" A terrifying silence spread through the atmosphere. This was not a question. It was a noose around the criminal's neck.
Sensing the danger, Sub-Inspector ordered, "Turn off all the lights."
Darkness fell, and now there was only a distance of a few inches between Sub-Inspector's heartbeat and the truth, i.e. the deep darkness. The Sub-Inspector whispered in Constable Khan's ear, "Khan, bring a long stick." When the stick was lowered inside the gutter, it struck something. Sub-Inspector skillfully rotated it and pulled it out. A small plastic slipper was stuck on the tip of the stick. Sub-Inspector took its picture in the light of his mobile torch's faint beam and, with great cleverness, replaced the gutter lid exactly as if nothing had happened there. Cutting through the crowd, he reached Noman's father and placed the mobile screen before him. It was as if the father's world was devastated in his eyes.
"Sir,
This is the same slipper that I bought for him 2 days ago." His voice became choked with emotion. Sub-Inspector placed a hand on his heart. "Keep courage, we still have to catch the killers. Do not tell the crowd anything yet." The sub-inspector knew that if the mob found out at this time, the law would be taken into their own hands and the real criminals would escape. He played a move. Amanullah, Kalamullah.
Come, show us the place where you were playing.
Under this excuse, he brought both of them to the police station. Within the 4 walls of the station, Sub-Inspector played his card. He took Kalamullah aside and said, Amanullah has blurted out everything, that you threw the body in the gutter. Look at this picture. Kalamullah, panicked, spoke out, "No sir. The body was thrown by Amanullah, not me." This was the confession Sub-Inspector was searching for. But the story did not end here. When Sub-Inspector asked where the two of you children got so much courage from, a third name surfaced, 42-year-old Ikram, fictional name. That person who had assisted them in snatching the life of that innocent child. The police quietly picked up Ikram and, having handcuffed all three accused, brought them back to the same gutter. Now the light of morning was spreading. The entire village was standing with bated breath. Sub-Inspector ordered, "Remove the lid." As soon as the heavy slab was removed, the screams of the entire crowd broke out upon seeing the scene there. As soon as the heavy lid of the gutter was removed, every eye present there was left stunned. In the midst of the depth and filth of the gutter lay the lifeless body of innocent Noman. That child who, until yesterday, used to run around in the streets of this village, was today sleeping an eternal sleep in a dark and dirty place. An uproar broke out in the crowd. The screams and cries made the atmosphere mournful. Sub-Inspector, who had searched for this child all night like a father, could not control his emotions. In a state of anger and grief, he dealt a forceful slap each to Amanullah and Kalamullah and roared, asking, "Speak. Why did you kill this innocent soul? What had he done wrong to you?" In front of the entire village, those two boys stood with their eyes lowered toward the ground. Addressing them, the Sub-Inspector said, "Now here, in front of everyone, tell every single thing truthfully from the beginning. Otherwise, remember, the law will deal with you with iron hands."
The confession of crime.
Amanullah began to tell in a trembling voice how they brought Noman to their house on the pretext of playing. There, abuse was committed against him, and when the child, being scared, started crying and threatened to tell his family, they strangled him out of fear of being caught. After extinguishing the lamp of this innocent one's life, they chose the gutter built outside the house to dispose of the body, so that no one would have suspicion. The Sub-Inspector had the body recovered safely and sent it to the hospital for post-mortem. It was the result of his tireless hard work and 24 hours of continuous investigation that the killers were caught from right in front of their own house. After the recovery of the body and the confession of the crime, Sub-Inspector prepared the case file with such skill that no way was left for the criminals to escape. All legal requirements were completed with full diligence. When the medical reports came out, they confirmed the heinous act of the accused. Science and law together shook the foundations of their lies. When this case ran in court, the evidence collected by Sub-Inspector and the DNA reports proved to be decisive. Every single drop of innocent Noman's blood was demanding justice, and finally, the judge picked up his pen. Amanullah and Kalamullah were sentenced to life imprisonment 3 times each for this unpardonable crime of theirs. Justice won, and the accused were pushed behind bars. But was this story really that simple? Justice was indeed served, but when Sub-Inspector went to leave those accused at the jail, why were there tears in his eyes? A tough police officer, who found the killers in 24 hours. Why was he troubled while entering those brutal criminals into the prison? And that third accused, whose name those 2 boys had taken, why did he not go to jail with them? After this case, what kind of difficulties did Sub-Inspector have to face that changed his life? The answers to all these questions and the biggest secret of that dark night are hidden in our next story, The Third Sinner and an Officer's Tears.